Have you ever felt something is behind you? Even when you're completely alone, presence you cannot see, yet it never leaves. This is not just a shadow. It's a story of fear, of mystery, and of the unknown. Tonight, step into the darkness with me as I reveal the chilling truth about the shadow that follows me. I still remember the very first night when everything changed. It was late, almost midnight, and the world outside was quiet. My room was dimly lit by a small lamp on the corner table, casting long shapes across the walls. I was finishing a book, feeling tired, when suddenly I felt a strange heaviness in the air. It was the kind of silence that doesn't comfort you, but makes you hold your breath. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me because of the late hour. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow. It wasn't the kind of shadow made by furniture or the flicker of the lamp. No, this shadow moved, slowly, carefully, as if it was alive. I turned my head quickly, expecting to see anything that could explain it. But the room was empty. My door was closed, the window locked. Nothing could have caused that shape. My heart started to beat faster. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the feeling, but deep inside, I knew something was wrong. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again, that strange pull, like something was watching me, standing in the corner where the light didn't reach. I kept opening my eyes, expecting to catch it, but the moment I looked directly, there was nothing. Just the quiet, the darkness, and the echo of my own breathing. The days after that were not the same. During daylight, everything seemed normal. The sun shone, people laughed outside, and life moved on. But at night, when the lights dimmed, I could sense it again. That shadow. It never touched me, never spoke, but it followed. I could see its shape when I wasn't looking directly at it, always shifting, always close. I tried to tell myself it was only my imagination, that maybe I was too tired, or maybe the lamp's light was playing tricks on my mind. But how do you explain the feeling of being watched? How do you explain waking up in the middle of the night because you feel someone standing right next to your bed? The scariest part wasn't just the shadow itself, it was the realization that it wasn't tied to a place. I saw it in my room, yes, but then one evening, when I was walking home, I noticed it again on the ground, stretching behind me, even though there was no light source strong enough to cast it. That was the moment I truly understood. This wasn't just a shadow in my room. This was a shadow that followed me. And once it finds you, it never lets go. When something strange first enters your life, your mind tries to find reasons not to believe it. That's exactly what I did. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. A shadow couldn't just move on its own. There had to be light, an angle, something real. I convinced myself it was nothing more than tired eyes and an overactive imagination. But deep down I knew I was lying to myself. The nights grew heavier. It wasn't just about seeing the shadow anymore, it was about feeling it. Every time I turned off the light and tried to sleep, I felt a pressure in the air. The room seemed thicker, almost like it was harder to breathe. Sometimes I would hear faint whispers, too soft to understand, but loud enough to know they were there. I ignored them, pulling the blanket tighter around me, hoping that hiding would make it go away. Then came the cold. I would wake up shivering in the middle of the night. Even though it was summer and the air outside was warm, my blanket couldn't stop it. The cold wasn't in the air, it was inside me. It felt like something standing right next to me, draining the warmth from my body. Still, I said nothing. Still, I ignored it. One evening I was brushing my teeth in front of the bathroom mirror when I saw something that froze me in place. Behind me, just over my shoulder, was a shadow darker than the rest of the room. It was shaped like a person, but there was no one there. I spun around quickly, but the bathroom was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the shadow was gone. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold my toothbrush. I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe me? My friends would laugh, my family would tell me I was stressed, and everyone would say I needed more sleep, so I stayed silent. That was my mistake, because the more I ignored it, the stronger it became. The shadow wasn't just following me anymore, it was learning about me. It knew my habits, my fears, my routines. It knew when I was alone. I began to notice the timing. It always showed itself when I was weakest, when I was tired, when I was vulnerable. At first, it stayed at the edge of the room, Then it moved closer, inch by inch, night after night. Sometimes when I turned quickly, I swore I saw a hand reaching out of the dark, a hand made of nothing but black smoke, dissolving the second I looked directly at it. My skin would crawl, and my stomach would turn cold, but I forced myself to pretend it wasn't real. Ignoring it didn't make it disappear. It made it bolder. That is, when I realized. The shadow wasn't here. Just something I was seeing it was something that was seeing me. At first, the shadow was a strange mystery, something I questioned, something I thought would fade away with time. But after weeks of sleepless nights, after countless moments of cold dread, something inside me changed. Fear stopped being an occasional visitor, it became my new normal. Every night, I prepared myself for it. I made sure the lights were bright, I double-checked the locks, and I told myself that tonight would be different. But it never was. The moment the world fell quiet, the shadow returned. I could feel it waiting, even before I saw it. My body would tense up, my heart would start racing, and I'd hold my breath without even realizing it. Fear had become part of my routine. As regular as brushing my teeth or locking my door, soon the little things in my life started to change. I stopped going out late at night because the darkness outside felt even heavier than before. I avoided mirrors whenever I could, afraid I'd see something standing behind me. Even when I sat with friends during the day, laughing and pretending to be normal, my mind was somewhere else. Always watching, always waiting. The worst part was the silence. The shadow never spoke. It never made a clear sound, but its silence was louder than anything I had ever heard. Sometimes I would hear faint scratching in the walls or a breath that wasn't mine. I knew it was there, yet it never revealed itself fully. That silence ate away at me. It was like living in a game I didn't understand, one I couldn't win. I tried to fight it in little ways. I kept my room lit all night, but the shadow still found a way to move. I played music, hoping the sound would drown it out, but no matter how loud the song was, I could still feel its presence. I even stayed awake for days, pushing my body to the edge, thinking maybe if I didn't sleep it couldn't reach me. But exhaustion only made me weaker, and when I finally collapsed, the dreams I had were worse than the waking nights. The shadow had followed me into my dreams. There, it was no longer just a blur or a figure. In my sleep it stood tall, its form clearer than ever, human shape, but wrong. Too long, too thin, its edges melting into the darkness around it. And always, those eyes, two pits of emptiness staring straight into me. When I woke, my body was covered in sweat, my heart pounding like I had just run a marathon. Even in the safety of daylight, I could still feel its gaze. After a while, I stopped asking myself if it was real. Real or not, it had power over me. My life wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the thing in the shadows. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, no matter how many excuses I made, deep inside, I knew the truth. This wasn't just fear, this was possession. The first time I heard it clearly, I froze. I had just turned off the light and crawled into bed, pulling the blanket up to my chin. The room was silent, so still that I could hear the ticking of the clock on my desk. Then, from the corner where the darkness was deepest, a sound broke through. It was a whisper, soft, almost too soft to catch. At first, I thought it was my mind again, playing cruel tricks on me. But the voice came again, clearer this time, brushing against my ears like icy wind. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was sharp, urgent, and full of something I can only call hunger. I sat up, my body stiff, and turned on the lamp. The whisper stopped instantly. The room looked the same, empty, quiet, harmless. But my heart wouldn't calm down. My hands shook as I held onto the blanket like it was my only shield. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next evening, the whispers returned. This time I heard faint laughter mixed in. Not the kind of laughter that brings joy, but the kind that crawls under your skin and makes you feel small. It's like something was mocking me, enjoying my fear. Every time I turned the light back on, the sound vanished. Every time I turned it off, it returned. Days passed, and the whispers grew bolder. They followed me into the bathroom, into the kitchen, even into the street at night. I could hear them faintly behind me, even when no one else was around. Sometimes it sounded like multiple voices overlapping, tangled together, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Other times, it was one single voice, low, heavy, and cold. The scariest part was when it began to say my name. The first time, I almost screamed. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard your name. My entire body went stiff. The voice was so close, right next to my ear, even though I was alone. I turned quickly, but no one was there. Just darkness, stretching across the room like a living thing. From that night on, the voice wouldn't stop, whispered my name again and again. Sometimes softly, sometimes almost a growl. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating properly. My reflection in the mirror looked thinner, weaker, with dark circles under my eyes. People around me asked if I was sick. I wanted to tell them the truth, but how do you explain a shadow that speaks? One night, I gathered all my courage and shouted into the darkness. "What do you want from me?" For a moment, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. Then, slowly from the corner of the room, came the reply. Not words this time, just a single sound. A laugh, and in that laugh I realized something terrifying. Shadow wasn't just following MIT, it was playing with me, like a predator circling its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By now, sleep had become a stranger to me. Every night felt like a battle I couldn't win. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. So when I did, the shadow was always there, sometimes in the corner of the room, sometimes standing closer, sometimes hovering right above me. The moment I drifted into sleep, I would dream of it. And the worst part? In my dreams, it felt more real than ever. The dreams were not like normal dreams. They were too vivid, too sharp. I could feel the texture of the cold floor beneath my feet. I could hear the creak of doors opening, though no one was there to open them. Always, I could see the shadow following me, never running, never rushing, just walking slowly behind, step by step. It never needed to catch MIT, only needed to remind me that escape was impossible. When I woke from these dreams, the terror didn't end. My room would feel colder, the air heavy with something invisible pressing against me. I would sit up, sweating, trying to catch my breath, but my body refused to calm down. I began to fear the night itself. Every sunset filled me with dread, knowing that once darkness fell, my tormentor would return. The lack of sleep started to break me down in the daylight too. My hands shook constantly. My eyes burned, red and dry from endless hours awake. At school, at work, or wherever I went, people noticed. They asked if I was sick, if I was depressed. But how could I explain that the reason I couldn't sleep was because a shadow was haunting me? Who would believe that? I left the lights on all night, but even then I could feel the weight of its presence. I played music loudly, but the whispers cut through it like a knife through paper. I even tried sleeping at a friend's house, hoping maybe distance would weaken it. But the shadow followed me there too. The second I closed my eyes, I saw it in their home, standing silently at the foot of the bed. I started drinking more coffee, gulping down energy drinks just to stay awake. For a while, it worked. I thought I had beaten it by refusing to sleep. But the human body can only last so long. After 3 nights awake, I finally collapsed. My body shut down, dragging me into sleep, whether I wanted it or not. And that's when I had the worst dream of all. In that dream, I wasn't running. I was tied to a chair in an endless black space. The shadow stood in front of me, taller than ever, its form sharper, its edges twisting like smoke. It leaned forward, and though it had no mouth, I heard it clearly. "You can't escape me." I woke up screaming, my throat raw, tears streaming down my face. The blanket was twisted around my body like chains, and the room was ice cold. That was the night I stopped pretending. Shadow wasn't just in my imagination, it was real, and it wanted me. The shadow no longer waited for me to sleep. It began to invade my waking hours, showing itself in places where I once felt safe. First, it only appeared at night, in the corner of my room, or in the mirror when I least expected it. But soon it started to follow me everywhere. At school, on the street, even in broad daylight, when the sun should have chased away every trace of darkness. I remember one morning clearly. I was walking to class, the bright sun overhead, the world alive with people rushing around me. For a moment I felt almost normal, almost safe. But then I looked down. There was my shadow, stretched out in front of me, but behind it, just a step away, was another one. Darker, longer, its edges didn't match the angle of the sunlight. I froze in the middle of the sidewalk, staring at it. and when I turned my head, just for a second, I thought I saw a tall, thin figure standing right there among the crowd. Nobody else seemed to notice. My chest tightened. I ran the rest of the way, but the memory of that extra shadow followed me. Das? That's when I realized something horrifying. This thing wasn't tied to a place. It wasn't my room, or my house, or my dreams. It was tied to me. Everywhere I went, little signs reminded me that I was never alone. Doors creaked open by themselves. Lights flickered, even in buildings full of people. Sometimes my phone would glitch, its screen showing nothing but static or blackness for a few seconds, before returning to normal. My friends joked about it, saying I was cursed. They laughed, but I didn't. I knew the truth. The haunting grew worse at night. The whispers turned into clearer words, though I still couldn't understand the language. Sometimes they came from far away, like voices echoing down a long tunnel. Other times, they were right next to my ear, so close that I could feel the air shift against my skin. I began sleeping with headphones on, blasting music just to drown it out. But even then, I could hear it underneath the songs. A constant reminder one night. I decided to test it. I set up my phone on my desk, camera pointing toward my bed. I pressed record, hoping to capture proof. For hours, nothing happened. The room was still just me lying there, tossing and turning. But around 3 a.m., the video changed. The screen flickered. A shadow moved across the frame, tall, thin, wrong. My sleeping self stirred as if sensing it. Then, for a brief second, the figure leaned over me, its form blotting out the camera completely. The recording cut to black. When I woke up and saw the video, my stomach dropped. I deleted it immediately, but not because I wanted to forget. I deleted it because I knew no one else could ever see it. If I showed it to anyone, they'd think I faked it. And worse, I feared that sharing its image might give it more power, might spread it beyond me. From that night on, I understood one thing. The shadow wasn't just haunting me. It was feeding off me. The more I feared it, the stronger it became. Now, fear was the one thing I couldn't stop giving it. The longer the shadow stayed with me, the more real it began to feel. It was no longer just something I saw or heard, it became something I felt. Its presence was like a weight pressing against my chest, a heaviness that made it hard to breathe. I could be sitting in the middle of my room with all the lights on, but the moment it arrived, the air would shift. The warmth would drain away, and every hair on my body would stand on end. At first, I thought it was just my imagination fear, playing games with my senses. But then the little signs started to pile up. My lamp would flicker when nothing else in the house lost power. The clock on my wall would stop ticking exactly at 3:03 a.m. every night, then start again as if nothing had happened. My books fell off the shelves without reason, one by one, as though invisible fingers had brushed against them. But the clearest sign came one night when I was lying in bed, half asleep. The blanket was pulled tightly around me, and I was trying to keep my eyes closed, forcing myself to drift away. That's when I felt it, a dip in the mattress. Small at first, then heavier, like someone had sat down right next to me. My body froze, my eyes wide open, but I didn't dare look. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would burst. The pressure grew stronger, as if the unseen figure was leaning closer, studying me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. After what felt like hours, the weight lifted. The air returned to normal, but I stayed awake until morning, too terrified to move. From that night onward, the presence was undeniable. It wasn't just a shadow lurking in the corner, it was something alive, intelligent, and aware of me. I began to notice patterns. It came most often when I was weak, when I was exhausted, when I was sick, when I was alone. It never attacked, never touched me in a violent way, but it hovered just close enough to remind me it could. That was worse than any physical harm. The waiting, the anticipation. The scariest moment came during dinner one evening. My family was sitting at the table, laughing and talking, but I couldn't focus. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again standing in the hallway, darker than the shadows around it, staring directly at me. I blinked and it was gone, but I dropped my fork, my hands shaking. No one else had seen it, no one else ever did. It was mine alone. I started keeping track of its visits in a notebook. Each time I wrote down the time, the place, and what it did. But as the days went on, I noticed something disturbing. The entries grew closer together. First it came once a week, then every few days, then every single night. The pages filled quickly, and the ink marks became shaky from my trembling hands. One night, I tried something new. I whispered into the dark. "Why are you here?" For a long time there was nothing, then faintly a reply. "Because you see me." My blood ran cold. That was the moment I understood the terrible truth. This shadow wasn't following me by accident, it had chosen me. And the more I acknowledged it, the stronger its grip became. Until this point, the shadow had been terrifying, but it had always kept its distance. It was a watcher, a follower, a whisperer in the dark. It haunted my dreams, my reflections, my nights. But I always told myself one thing: at least it hadn't touched me. That thought was my last wall of safety, the final line between me and complete despair. But one night, that wall crumbled. It was late, past midnight, and I was too exhausted to stay awake. My eyes burned, and my body ached from endless sleepless nights. I tried to fight it, but sleep pulled me under like waves dragging me into the sea. At first, I dreamed the usual dark hallways, endless footsteps, the shadow always behind me. But then the dream shifted. I was no longer running. I was standing still in my own room. The shadow was closer than ever before, and then I felt it. A hand, cold, weightless, but undeniably there. It brushed against my arm, slow and deliberate. My whole body stiffened, and in that instant I snapped awake. My room looked the same, the lamp still glowing faintly, the door still closed, but my arm was freezing cold, as if ice had touched it. I rubbed it, trying to bring warmth back, but the chill sank deep, straight into my bones. That night was the first time I screamed. The sound tore out of me, raw and desperate. I scrambled out of bed, my body shaking, my eyes darting around the room. Nothing was there, but I knew, deep in my gut, that something had touched me. From that night onward, the shadow grew bolder. It didn't stay in the corners anymore, didn't wait for me to ignore it. Sometimes I would feel a brush across my face while I lay half asleep. Sometimes I would wake to the sensation of fingers running through my hair. The touches were never violent, but they were worse than any attack. They were intimate, personal, as if the shadow was claiming me, piece by piece. The more it touched me, the weaker I felt. My energy drained faster each day. My body grew thinner, my skin paler, as though something was feeding on me. Friends noticed, teachers noticed, but I had no answer to give them. How could I explain that a shadow was stealing my strength? I tried praying, holding charms, burning incense, even leaving salt across my windows. Nothing stopped it. In fact, the more I resisted, the stronger it seemed to become. My dreams turned into nightmares where I couldn't move, pinned down by invisible weight. The shadow leaning over me, its face inches from mine. Though it had no eyes, I could feel it staring into me, searching for something deep inside. One morning, I woke with marks on my skin, thin red lines across my arm and neck like scratches. They stung when I touched them, but I had no explanation. My nails weren't long enough to cause them, and I hadn't left my bed. The realization made my stomach twist. I wasn't just imagining this anymore. The shadow was leaving proof behind. That was when I finally understood the truth I had been avoiding. It wasn't T just watching me anymore. It wasn't just whispering or following. The shadow had crossed the line. It was touching me because it wanted more. For weeks, the touches haunted me, but nothing prepared me for what happened with the mirror. It began like any other night. I sat on my bed, the lamp glowing dimly, trying to distract myself by reading a book. But no matter how hard I tried, my eyes kept drifting to the tall mirror in the corner of my room. It had always been there, part of my furniture, reflecting nothing more than a tired teenager. But that night, something felt different. I glanced at it, my reflection seemed off. At first I thought it was just my imagination, the way shadows stretched strangely in the low light. But then I noticed something horrifying. My reflection was in T, moving at the same time as me. When I blinked, it blinked a second later. When I tilted my head, it lagged, as though the glass had become a window into somewhere else, a place where something was pretending to be me. I froze, staring at the mirror, my book slipping from my hands. My reflection slowly smiled, even though my lips hadn't moved. The grin stretched too wide, unnatural, mocking. My stomach twisted, and I leaped from the bed, pulling the sheet over the mirror. I didn't care how crazy it looked. I just needed it hidden. For a while, that worked. Or at least I convinced myself it did. But a few nights later, I woke in the middle of the night to a faint scratching sound. It was coming from the corner where the mirror stood, now draped in cloth. My heart pounded as I sat up, listening. The scratching grew louder, sharper, as if nails were dragging across glass. Terrified, I crept closer and yanked the sheet away. I wish I hadn't. The mirror didn't show me lying in my bed. Instead, it reflected a different version of my room, darker, colder, the corners twisted with shadows. And there, standing right behind my reflection, was the figure. Tall, thin, blacker than any shadow could ever be. Its hand rested on my reflection's shoulder, even though in reality, nothing touched me. My breath caught in my throat. The shadow's head tilted, as though it knew I was watching, and then my reflection's eyes turned completely black. I screamed and stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The room went dark. In the chaos, I thought I heard laughter echoing from the mirror, though my ears rang with panic. I scrambled to turn the light back on, and when I finally did, the mirror showed only me again, wide-eyed, trembling, clutching the lamp like it was a weapon. After that night, I covered the mirror with a heavy blanket and refused to uncover it again. But the fear didn't end there, because sometimes, even with the cloth blocking it, I could still hear faint tapping from behind the glass, like fingers drumming, waiting. It was then that I realized the shadow wasn't just following me anymore. It was trying to break through, using the mirror as a doorway. And the worst part was learning how. By this point, my life had changed completely. I no longer felt like a normal person. Every room I entered, every hallway I walked through, every corner I turned, I felt it. Oh, the shadow. Watching, always watching. It didn't matter if I was with people or alone. At school, while friends chatted and laughed, I could feel invisible eyes on me. In the library, surrounded by silence, I sensed it between the bookshelves, hiding where no one else could see. Even in crowded streets, with dozens of people rushing by, I felt its gaze burn into my skin. And the truth was simple. The shadow didn't need to be seen to be real. Its presence alone was enough to crush me. The strangest part was how it seemed to affect the world around me. Animals noticed it before people ever did. The neighbor's dog, usually friendly, would growl and bark whenever I walked past, its eyes fixed not on me, but just behind me. Stray cats hissed and arched their backs before bolting into the night. Even birds stopped singing when I stepped into the yard, leaving an eerie silence that chilled me more than their song ever could. Then came the flickers. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses and reflections other than the mirror on glass windows, in shiny surfaces, even on the screen of my phone when it went black. Always the same tall, thin outline, standing just close enough to remind me it was there, never close enough for me to see details. Once, while video calling a friend, I saw it move across the background of my own camera. My friend laughed, thinking it was a trick of the light, but my blood ran cold. The shadow's gaze wasn't like a normal stare. It felt heavier, sharper, like knives pressing against my skin. At night, lying in bed, I could feel it most. My body would tense without warning. And I knew without opening my eyes that something stood over me, staring down. Its silence screamed louder than any words. When I dared to peek, sometimes I caught the faint outline of its head. It's tilted in that same mocking way, as if it enjoyed watching me suffer. I tried to escape it. I left the house for long walks. I stayed with friends. I even spent nights in hotels. But no matter where I went, the watcher came too. The first night in a hotel, I almost believed I had left it behind. The room felt lighter, safer. But at exactly 3 a.m., I woke up cold. The curtains fluttered, though the windows were sealed, and in the reflection of the TV screen, I saw it again standing silently at the foot of the bed. My stomach dropped. There was no running away. What made it worse was how it seemed to know me now. It wasn't random anymore. It knew when to appear, when I was most vulnerable, most afraid. Sometimes I swore I heard faint breathing, matching my own, as if mocking me. Other times, I felt pressure on my chest, like it was leaning closer, studying me. That was when I understood something terrifying. The shadow didn't just want to scare me. It didn't just want to follow me. It wanted me to know it was always there, to remind me that I could never escape its gaze. As much as I hated to admit it, it was working. There are many sounds we take for granted in life. The rustle of leaves, the hum of electricity, the distant echo of cars on the road. But footsteps. Footsteps in the dark are different. They carry weight. They carry presence. And the night I first heard them, I realized the shadow was no longer content with silence. It started slowly. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it, a faint creak of the floorboard near my door. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I told myself it was the house settling, maybe the woods shifting with the cool night air. But then, another step, and another. Each one deliberate, slow and heavy, as if something or someone was walking toward me. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. The room was dimly lit by the glow of the streetlight outside my window, enough to see the outlines of furniture. But the door was closed, locked just as it had been when I went to bed. Still, the sound continued. Step, step, step. Closer and closer. I grabbed my phone, its light flickering across the room, but nothing was there. No intruder, no sign of anyone. Just me and the thick silence that followed. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was my imagination. But then the footsteps returned, this time from the other side of the room, near the mirror I had covered. My skin prickled. My stomach twisted. The sound was impossible. I pulled the blanket over my head like a frightened child, hoping it would pass. But the footsteps didn't stop. They circled the bed, one slow step after another, as if the shadow was pacing, enjoying my fear. I could feel the vibration of each step travel through the floor into my bones. Sometimes they stopped suddenly, and the silence that followed was even worse, because I knew without seeing that it was standing still, right beside me. Minutes felt like hours. My body shook, drenched in sweat. My fists clenched tightly around the blanket. Then faintly, I heard breathing. Not mine. Not steady, calm breathing. It was heavy, ragged, as though something unnatural was struggling to breathe in a body it didn't belong to. It hovered above me, close enough that I swore I could feel the air shift against my skin. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw the blanket off and screamed, switching on the lamp with trembling hands. The room flooded with light. The footsteps stopped. The breathing vanished. Everything was normal again. My books lay where I had left them, my door still locked, my window closed. Yet the air felt thick, charged, as though something had just slipped back into the darkness the second the light appeared. That night was the first time I cried, not just out of fear, but out of hopelessness. I realized then that no lock, no blanket, no prayer could stop it. The shadow wasn't just haunting me. It was inside my space, sharing the same air, the same floor, the same silence. And the worst part, when dawn finally came and sunlight filled the room, I saw faint footprints in the dust near my bed. Too large to be mine, too long, too wrong. That was the moment I understood. The shadow wasn't just watching anymore. It was walking freely in my world. For weeks, the shadow had whispered, faint, broken sounds I couldn't understand. But the night it spoke my name was the night everything changed. It was around 3 a.m, the same cursed hour when everything seemed to happen. I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying not to fall asleep, because I knew the dreams were worse than the reality. The air in the room felt heavy, almost like the weight of water pressing down on me. And then, out of the stillness, I heard it. My name, not shouted, not spoken loudly, just whispered, so close to my ear that I could almost feel the cold breath brushing against my skin. My entire body went rigid. For a second, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just the echo of my own thoughts. But then it came again, louder this time. Clearer, my name, repeated slowly as though the shadow was testing the sound, savoring it. I sat up quickly, turning on the lamp, my chest heaving. The room looked normal. The mirror still covered, the door still locked, the window still sealed. Nothing out of place. But the moment I turned the light off again, it came back. My name whispered from the corner of the room. My name whispered from the ceiling above me. My name whispered from under the bed. It was everywhere, surrounding me, drowning me. I screamed into the dark. What do you want from me? For a moment, the whispers stopped. The silence was so sharp it made my ears ring. My heart pounded, waiting, dreading the reply. And then, from right beside me, so close that it made my skin crawl, the voice answered, "You." That single word was enough to shatter me. It wasn't just a random haunting anymore. It wasn't just a shadow following me by mistake. It had a purpose, desire, and that desire was me. After that night, the voice grew bolder. It didn't hide in whispers anymore. Sometimes it spoke words I couldn't understand, ancient guttural words that scraped against my ears like claws. Other times it repeated my name again and again until I felt like I would go mad. It mocked me when I cried, laughed when I begged, and stayed silent only when I tried to ignore it. I stopped trusting silence. Every quiet moment felt like a trap, like it was just waiting to break me again. Even during the day, when I was surrounded by people, sometimes I heard it faintly in the back of my mind, calling me. My friends would talk to me, but all I could hear was that cold voice. One night, desperate, I recorded myself sleeping again, hoping to prove it was real. In the morning, when I listened back, my blood froze. The recording was filled with whispers, not just one voice, but many, overlapping, chanting, hissing, and through them all, one voice stood out, sharp and clear. It was mine. On the recording, I could hear myself repeating my own name in the same chilling tone the shadow used, over and over again. Even though I remembered being silent the entire night, that was when I realized the shadow wasn't just following me. It was inside me, twisting my own voice, my own mind, until I could no longer tell where it ended and I began. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted to know the difference anymore. By now, I had accepted one terrifying truth. I could not escape the shadow. No matter where I went, no matter what I did, it found me. But what I was prepared for was the night it blurred the line between dream and reality. It began like every other nightmare. I was standing in my room, but it wasn't really my room. The walls stretched too high, the corners twisted unnaturally, and the air shimmered like smoke. I knew I was dreaming, but it felt too sharp, too vivid. My feet touched the cold wooden floor, and I could even smell the faint scent of burning candles. Dreams aren't supposed to feel this real. And then I saw it. The shadow was there, standing in the corner, watching. Its body was taller than ever, almost scraping the ceiling. Its edges rippled like smoke, but its form was clearer now. Its arms were long, too long, dangling almost to the ground. I couldn't see a face, but I could feel its eyes locked on me, piercing through the darkness straight into my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen, trapped inside my own body. Slowly, the shadow began to move toward me. Its steps were silent, but each one echoed inside my skull, as if my mind itself was vibrating with the sound. When it reached me, it leaned down. Though it had no mouth, I heard it whisper, "Not a dream." The words jolted me awake. I sat up in bed, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. My room looked normal again, lamp glowing, books on the desk, window shut. But something was wrong. My throat burned, raw as though I'd been screaming for hours. My muscles ached, and my chest throbbed with pain. I stumbled to the bathroom to splash water on my face. But when I looked into the mirror, my heart stopped. Scratches. Thin red lines across my neck and arms. Fresh, stinging marks that hadn't been there before I went to bed. My breath quickened and I gripped the sink to steady myself. If it had been just a dream, how could it leave marks on my body? For the next few nights, the same thing happened again and again. I would dream of being trapped in that twisted version of my room, always with the shadow standing closer and closer. And every morning, I woke up with new bruises, scratches, or cuts across my skin. I tried to convince myself I was hurting myself in my sleep, thrashing around without realizing it. But deep down, I knew better. One night, desperate for proof, I stayed awake with a camera recording. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke in the morning, the camera was still running, but the footage made my blood run cold. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the lens flickered, and for 3 seconds, the screen went black. When it cleared, I saw myself sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring directly into the camera. My lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. Then, behind me, the shadow appeared, tall, thin, its hand resting on my shoulder. And then the recording cut out again. I didn't remember sitting up. I didn't remember speaking. But the scratches on my arm that morning told me it had been real. That was when I realized the shadow wasn't just haunting my nights anymore. It was dragging me into its world and pulling itself into mine. The boundary between dream and reality was gone. If I couldn't tell the difference anymore, then maybe I was already lost. The shadow had already shown me its whispers, its touch, and even its presence in my dreams. But what came next was worse than all of that combined. It was not sound. It was not sight. It was silence, a natural, suffocating silence that swallowed everything whole. It began one afternoon, not even at night. I was sitting at my desk, trying to write in my notebook, when suddenly I realized something strange. The ticking of the clock had stopped. I glanced up, but the hands still moved. Then I noticed my Finette spun silently, the usual hum completely gone. Outside, I looked for comfort in the noise of cars, birds, or even the wind, but nothing reached me. The world was moving, but the sound was gone. The silence was so deep, it hurt. My ears rang, like they were straining to hear something that no longer existed. My chest grew tight, and I swallowed hard, but even that small sound of my throat was missing. It was as though someone had pressed mute on reality. And then, in that crushing stillness, I felt it.
Adult.
I turned slowly, my stomach twisting, and there it was standing in the corner of the room, darker than the absence of sound itself. Its form looked sharper now, less smoke and more solid, as though the silence was feeding its strength. My lips trembled as I tried to speak, to scream, to beg, but no voice came out. My mouth opened, my chest heaved, but nothing. The silence had stolen even my own voice. The shadow tilted its head, mocking me. Then, slowly, it took a step forward. I stumbled back, my chair crashing against the floor, yet even that made no sound. My world had become a nightmare where only I and the shadow existed. The harder I tried to cry out, the emptier my throat felt. Finally, I grabbed my phone and hit record, hoping the device would capture what I couldn't. I held it up, shaking, staring at the shadow. It came closer, its edges rippling like tar dripping from the air itself. My vision blurred from fear, and I thought I would faint. Then, all at once, the silence broke. The clock ticked. The fan hummed. Birds cried outside. I gasped, clutching my chest, the sound of my own breath finally returning, but the shadow was gone. My phone was still recording. Hands trembling, I replayed the video, desperate for proof. At first, the footage looked normal me, sitting in the chair, glancing nervously around. Then, at the moment the silence began, the audio cut out completely. The screen glitched, static crawling across the image. And then I saw it. The shadow moving across the room, its form clearer than ever, towering, with long arms reaching out toward me. The recording ended abruptly, freezing on a single frame, the shadow standing behind me, one hand inches away from my throat. I dropped the phone, shaking and curled against the wall. That was when I understood. The silence wasn't an accident. It was the shadow's way of isolating me, of cutting me off from the world. No sound, no voice, no help. Just me and it. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive. Until this point, I believed the shadow belonged to the night. I convinced myself that as long as the sun rose and daylight filled the world, I was safe. The dark corners of my room were dangerous, but the brightness of the day was my shield. I clung to that hope like a lifeline, but I was wrong. The first time it showed itself in daylight, I nearly collapsed from fear. I was walking home from school on a sunny afternoon. The streets were busy with people, the sound of cars and voices filling the air. For once, I felt almost normal. I told myself maybe I had imagined everything, that the shadow was nothing more than my exhausted mind playing tricks. Then I looked down. My shadow stretched across the sidewalk just as it should have, but right next to it was another one, taller, darker, thinner. Its edges weren't smooth like mine, but jagged, as though it was tearing through reality. My breath caught, and I blinked hard, hoping it was just my eyes. But when I looked again, it was still there, following me step for step, sped up, my heart pounding. The second shadow matched me. I stopped. It stopped. I turned, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw a tall, black figure standing at the edge of the crowd, completely still, while everyone else moved around it. Nobody noticed. Nobody looked. It was watching only me. After that, daylight wasn't safe anymore. No matter where I went, I could feel its presence. In classrooms, I saw its reflection in the glass windows. On buses, I caught glimpses of it standing in the aisle when nobody else was there. Once, in the middle of the park, I looked at the pond's surface and saw it standing directly behind me, though when I turned, nothing was there. The worst moment came one afternoon in my kitchen. Sunlight poured in through the windows, bathing the room in warmth. I was making tea, trying to calm my nerves, when I glanced at the floor. Two shadows stretched across the tiles, mine and one more. My chest tightened. My hand shook so badly I dropped the cup, shattering it against the floor. I stumbled back, but the second shadow remained, closer now, its head tilted unnaturally. That's when I realized the truth. The shadow didn't need the darkness anymore. It had grown stronger. It could exist in light just as easily as in night. It wasn't bound by rules, by time, or by nature. Safety, I thought, daylight offered, was an illusion. I began to fear everything. Night or day, darkness or light, it didn't matter. My world was shrinking, and the shadow was filling every corner of it. I stopped leaving the house unless I had to. I avoided people, afraid they might see what followed me, or worse, that it might start following them too. One evening, desperate for answers, I whispered aloud, "Why are you here? Why me?" For a long moment, there was silence. Then, faintly, from the sunlit corner of the room, came a reply, "Because you let me in." The words chilled me more than the darkest night ever could. Fear has a strange way of shaping a person. At first, it makes you cautious, then it makes you paranoid. But when it never ends, when every waking and sleeping moment is filled with terror, it begins to break you. That's what the shadow did to me. It didn't just haunt me, it hollowed me out, piece by piece, until I no longer recognized myself. I stopped sleeping properly weeks ago. The constant nightmares left my body weak and my mind foggy. My hands shook even during the day, and my eyes burned with exhaustion. People around me noticed the changes. My teachers asked if I was unwell. Friends stopped inviting me out. Even my family looked at me with concern, whispering behind my back that something was wrong. But none of them could see the truth. None of them could see it. The isolation was the worst part. Imagine trying to explain to someone that a shadow is following you, that it whispers your name, touches you in the night, and leaves scratches across your skin. They would laugh, or worse, they would think you were insane. So I stayed silent, carrying the weight of it alone. And silence has a way of crushing you more than noise ever could. By now, the shadow didn't hide anymore, didn't stay in the corners of rooms or only appear in the dead of night. It made itself known whenever it pleased. Sometimes I would be walking through my house in the middle of the day and suddenly feel cold fingers brush my arm. Sometimes I'd be eating and hear my name hissed from behind me. Once I woke up and found every object on my desk knocked to the floor. Books, pens, even my lamp all scattered as though someone had swept their arm across it.
Ow.
But the true breaking point came one night. I was lying in bed, too tired to keep my eyes open, when I felt it. The air grew heavy, the same suffocating pressure I knew too well. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I turned my head, and there it was standing directly beside my bed. Taller than ever, darker than the night itself, its form clearer than I had ever seen. Its head tilted, and for the first time, it reached down. Its hand, long, bony, made of pure shadow, touched my chest. My body seized. The cold pierced through my skin, deeper than bone, straight into my soul. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My vision blurred, my body frozen, as though it was draining the very life from me. And then I heard it. A whisper, low and sharp. "You're mine." The world spun, and everything went black. When I woke the next morning, I was still in my bed, drenched in sweat, my chest aching as if something had crushed me. Red marks spread across my skin in the exact shape of a hand. That was when I broke. That was when I realized I couldn't fight it anymore. This wasn't just a haunting. This wasn't just fear. The shadow had claimed me. The night the shadow placed its hand on my chest, I thought it was the worst it could do to me. But the days that followed proved me wrong. That touch had not just been a threat, it had been a claim, brand. From that night onward, I was no longer just haunted. I was owned. The first sign was the mark. When I woke the next morning, the shape of its hand burned into my skin, faint but undeniable. 5 long, thin lines spread across my chest, each one dark red and tender to the touch. At first, I told myself it would fade like any bruise. But days passed, and instead of fading, the lines grew darker. They didn't heal. They didn't go away. They looked more and more like scars carved into me, permanent reminders of what had happened. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw them. And every time I saw them, I remembered the whisper, "You're mine." The mark was more than just physical. It changed something inside me. I started feeling weaker every day. My body grew thin, my face pale, my eyes sunken. Food lost its taste. Sleep no longer brought rest. It was as if the shadow had tied itself to me, draining me bit by bit. My energy wasn't my own anymore, belonged to it. But it wasn't just my body, it was my mind too. Strange thoughts crept into my head, thoughts I knew weren't mine. Sometimes, when I looked at people, I would hear a voice whispering, "They can't save you." Other times I would hear it laugh whenever I tried to pray or beg for help. At first I resisted, but soon I couldn't tell where my thoughts ended and its whispers began. The scariest part was how the shadow began to act through me. One night I woke to find myself standing in the middle of my room, my hands outstretched toward the mirror. I hadn't gotten up willingly. My body had moved on its own, as if pulled by invisible strings. My reflection stared back, but its eyes were pitch black. I stumbled back in horror, but deep down I knew it was already inside me, steering me like a puppet whenever it pleased. People noticed the change. My friends stopped talking to me completely, claiming I felt different, that my presence made them uneasy. My family avoided me too. They said I looked like a ghost, that my eyes were empty. Maybe they were right. Because half the time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see myself anymore. I saw something hollow, something wearing my skin, but not truly me. One night, desperate for answers, I searched online for stories like mine. I found whispers in forums, tales buried deep in forgotten threads. They all spoke of the same thing, an entity that marks its chosen. Once marked, escape is impossible. The shadow binds itself to you, feeds on you, and slowly replaces you. I slammed the laptop shut, trembling. The words echoed in my head. Replaces you. The mark on my chest pulsed with pain, almost as if it was alive, responding to my fear. I tore my shirt off and stared at it in the mirror. The lines glowed faintly in the dark, black veins spreading outward from them, threading across my skin like roots. That was when I realized the shadow wasn't just haunting me anymore. It was becoming me. By now, the shadow had become more than just a figure. It wasn't content to linger in corners or hide in silence. It began to change, to twist, to take on new forms, and that was when the real nightmare began. It started one night when I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The usual heavy air pressed down on me, and I knew it was near. But this time, instead of the tall, thin figure I had grown used to, I saw movement in the darkness by my window. Slowly, the darkness shifted, bent and stretched, until it formed a shape of face. Not a clear human face. It was distorted, its features stretched and broken like a painting smudged by dirty fingers. The eyes were hollow pits, wide and unblinking, and the mouth stretched far too wide, filled with jagged teeth. My chest tightened as I realized the truth. The shadow was showing me what it really looked like or what it wanted me to see. I shut my eyes, hoping it would vanish. But when I opened them again, there were more. Dozens of faces pressed against the walls, emerging from the darkness like figures trapped behind glass. They stared at me with empty eyes, their mouths twitching, whispering words I couldn't understand. Some looked angry, some looked sorrowful, and others looked hungry. My skin crawled, and my mind screamed, but no sound left my throat. From that night onward, the faces appeared often. Sometimes in the corner of my vision, sometimes in reflections, sometimes directly in front of me. They twisted and morphed constantly, never staying the same for long. One evening I saw the face of my mother, but her eyes were black, and her smile was wrong, too sharp, too cruel. Another time, I saw my own face in the darkness, staring back at me, whispering in the shadow's voice, "You're already mine." I stopped trusting what I saw. Every time I looked at someone I loved, I feared the shadow would use their face next, turning them into something unrecognizable. Even in crowded places, I caught glimpses of strangers' faces stretching unnaturally for a split second before snapping back to normal. I didn't know if it was really happening or if the shadow was playing with my mind. The worst moment came when I dreamed again. In the dream, I stood in a dark hallway lined with mirrors. Each mirror held a reflection of me, but every reflection's face was different. One had hollow eyes, another had a mouth stretched to its ears. Another was missing its skin entirely, just a skull grinning back at me. And at the end of the hallway stood the shadow, its head tilting as it whispered, "Which one is you?" I woke up screaming, clutching my face, afraid I wouldn't recognize myself anymore. My hands shook as I touched my skin, needing to feel that I was still real, still whole. But even then I wasn't sure, because when I looked in the mirror that morning, for just a second, my reflection smiled before I did. That was when I understood. The shadow wasn't just haunting me physically, it was breaking my identity, wanted me to question my own face, my own reality. It wanted me to lose myself completely until I became just another mask in its collection. The shadow had taken so much from me already, my sleep, my strength, even my sense of self. But nothing prepared me for the night it gave me a warning that chilled me more than all its whispers, touches, and faces combined. It began in the early hours, just after midnight. I was lying awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, too afraid to sleep. The room was silent, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that hums with tension, like the air before a storm. My chest felt heavy, my breath shallow. I knew it was here. The temperature dropped suddenly, the air turning icy, and then the whispers began. Not faint this time, not broken. Clear, loud. Dozens of voices, overlapping, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. They filled the room, circling me, rising and falling like a chant. My body trembled, and I clutched the blanket to my chest, tears burning my eyes. And then, cutting through the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. Deep, sharp, unmistakable. The shadow's voice soon. That single word silenced all the others. The room went still, so quiet I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. My throat tightened and I whispered, "What do you mean?" My voice cracked with fear. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the voice returned, closer, colder, as if it was speaking directly inside my skull. "Soon you will not wake." My entire body froze. My mind screamed at me to run, to move, to do anything, but I couldn't. The shadow stood at the foot of my bed, clearer than it had ever been. Its tall, thin body loomed over me, its arms swaying slightly as though pulled by unseen strings. Its head tilted, and for the first time I felt the weight of its gaze directly on me. It wasn't just watching anymore, it was deciding. I tried to fight back, to scream, to pray, but the words died in my throat. My body grew heavy, pinned down as if invisible chains bound me to the bed. The shadow leaned closer, its face inches from mine. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt them drilling into me, searching for something deep inside. Soon, it repeated, "You will belong." My vision blurred, the room spinning, and for a terrifying moment I thought I was dying. My chest heaved, but no air entered. My limbs twitched, but I couldn't move. The shadow's presence pressed down on me like the weight of an entire world. I thought this was it, that it had finally come to take me. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure lifted. I gasped, sucking in air, my body shaking violently. The shadow was gone. The room was empty, but the words still echoed in my head. "Soon you will not wake." The next morning, I checked my notebook, where I had been recording every encounter. My hand shook as I wrote down the words. And as I finished, something horrifying happened. The ink bled across the page, spreading like veins. My notebook tore itself down the middle. The words "You re-mine" scrawled across both halves, in a handwriting that was in T-mine. That was when I knew. The shadow wasn't just haunting me anymore, it was counting down, preparing for something final. I was running out of time. The night of the warning never left me. For days I walked around like a prisoner waiting for execution. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow made me tremble. I knew it was a matter of if the shadow would take me, it was a matter of when. I tried everything I could to stop it, salt across the doorways, candles burning through the night, prayers whispered until my voice went hoarse. None of it worked. The shadow grew stronger, bolder, and deep inside I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just haunting me anymore, it was preparing me. The final night began like all the others. I lay in bed, unable to sleep, the lamp casting weak light across the walls. But the air felt different, heavier, charged like static before lightning strikes. My skin prickled, and I knew this was it. The moment I had been dreading. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the light flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the room whole. I sat up quickly, my heart racing, and there it was, standing at the foot of my bed. Taller, sharper, more real than ever before. Its arms stretched unnaturally long, its head tilting as if mocking me. This time I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body was frozen, trapped in a paralyzing grip. The shadow moved closer, step by step, until it towered directly over me. Its hand rose slowly, reaching for my chest, the same place it had marked before. I braced myself for the cold touch. But this time it didn't just touch me, it sank into me. The cold spread through my chest, crawling into my veins like ice water. My body convulsed, my vision flickered, and I felt my very soul being pulled apart. The shadow wasn't outside me anymore, it was inside, filling every hollow corner of my being. I gasped, but no air came. I tried to fight, to push it out, but my limbs refused to move. My voice refused to scream. My mind was drowning in darkness. Then I heard it. Not outside, but inside, my own head. "You are mine." The voice echoed endlessly, bouncing through my skull, until I could no longer tell if it was speaking or if I was. My thoughts twisted, overlapping with whispers that weren't my own. I saw flashes in endless dark hallways, screaming faces, other souls trapped in shadows. And then I saw myself standing in the corner of my room, watching my own body writhe in bed. For one horrifying moment, there were two of me. The me that was fading, and the me that the shadow had created. When it was over, I woke up lying still in bed, the sun pouring in through the window. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe I had survived. But when I looked in the mirror, I knew the truth. My reflection smiled before I did. Its eyes were black. Now, I walk through the world, and people still see me, still hear my voice, still laugh at my words. But it's not really me anymore. I can feel it deep inside, waiting, controlling, twisting. The shadow didn't just follow me, it became me. And every time I look into someone else's eyes, I wonder how long until they see it too. How long until they realize that the person standing before them is not me, but the darkness that